is anybody here familiar with Ezra Klein? So, I have some very, very confusing opinions where this man is concerned. On the one hand, he's one of the main architects of abundance, which is basically the Democrats' attempt to fight back against the Republicans this time around, but also, you know, not in any really meaningful way. Like, okay, let me look up the abundance doctrine real quick to show you what its key points are. Blackmore says, who's they? Who are they? All right, let's see here. Ba, 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 ba. Do I actually have it here? The Abundance Doctrine. Abundance authors Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson believe the U.S. system of governments has become too legalistic, prioritizing process over outcomes and severely hindering climate change adaptation and mitigation. Using Operation Warp Speed and its deployment of COVID-19 vaccines as an example of a timely, successful government intervention, Klein and Thompson describe the government's role in innovation to do what cannot be done otherwise. New climate mitigation technology and out-of-the-box inventions are critical to solve the climate crisis, but are only possible with adequate funding and support scientists. Okay, I don't actually hate that. Most of that actually seems perfectly fucking reasonable. According to Klein and Thompson, though lawyers form less than 1% of the population, 1/3 of House members and Hall of Senators are lawyers. When you make legal training the default training for a political career, you make legal thinking the default thinking in politics. Klein and Thompson explain how legalism came about in the 60s. Lawyer and activist Ralph Nader and his Nader's Raiders were the first to sue the government because of its failure to ensure safe working environments in coal mines and apathy towards oil spills and tolerance of toxic waste discharges, destroying costs and communities. Nader was successful, and powerful legislation such as the Clean Water Act followed. The new approach of suing the government was not limited to environmental protection movements, however, and it has now become a common strategic roadblock. By Klein and Thompson's analysis, a new standard of democracy by lawsuit was established that painted the government solely as a source of wrongdoing rather than a potential cooperative ally. The authors write about the government's struggle with adversarial legalism, and it seeks to meet its responsibilities. Now the government has taken on the task of decarbonization and the responsibility of coordinating a once-in-a-century transformation of America's built landscape. But it is doing so with laws and agencies and habits that are better designed to block green construction than allow it. So we have this weird idea, and I think that's what most of this gets into. We have this weird idea that the government's job is to say no, as opposed to the government's job being to say yes. We have this idea in society that the government is there to provide the roadblocks, as opposed to being there to provide the way. If the government is going to be an apparatus that is made up of you, me, and all of us in society, then maybe it should be one that also serves that. Okay, fair enough. Those are the main takeaways there. I've been blocked from the New York Times because we suspect you're a robot. That's so fun. That's so great. I love when I put something into archive and it doesn't actually work. That is my favorite. I adore that. That is the grandest. Anyway, we're just going to skip all that. So, we're going to move forward a little bit. To something that I think is very, very interesting, where Ezra Klein is concerned. Now, all of you in the chat right now, I am curious, how many of you would consider that the Epstein files right now is probably one of the most important events, like the drop of the Epstein files, the analysis of it, the insights it's given us into how the world operates? How many of you would consider that important right now? How many of you would consider that one of the more important things that has happened recently? Nick says, them. I also just realized I said that while I was in the middle of an ad, and I think that may be half the problem. Sidebar, hey, Twitch, you're already a website that is built to be a loss leader. Why not allow us as streamers to turn off the goddamn fucking advertisements? I'm sorry, but especially when you're in a situation like me, where I need to do things in a certain timed manner, I'm not just going to pause the stream for 3 minutes because an advertisement has started. That's stupid. Tales of Atonement says Epstein was directly responsible for the rise of transphobia across the world. Yeah, okay, cool. So it looks like So Clueless says me, Gideon says sure, CJ Sonic says yeah, pretty big deal, Max the Demon Freak says yeah, okay, cool. So we've got a general idea, at least a lot of us do, this is a very, very important thing. So why is it that last year, Ezra Klein is perfectly fine making an entire thing about how Trump can't shake Epstein and how it's going to be a nail in the coffin and all that, but then when we look now, he's not really talking about it all that much. And that's kind of weird to me. Now, Tinfoil Hattie, there is always the perspective. There's always the perspective that the people who are not willing to talk about the Epstein files right now are the people who stand to gain from defending people who are in them. That is not me saying that Ezra Klein is trying to do that in any way, shape, or form, but it is kind of weird to me that there's no conversation about that when this is the guy who is quite literally writing the entire playbook for the Democratic Party going forward. So, that's strange to me. We have a person who is incredibly, like Project 2025 levels, incredibly powerful within the Democratic Party in terms of like where their opinion can go and how many people hear it. We have a person like that, and this person doesn't want to use one of the most important political gavels that we have ever had that can be used as a weapon against people that do not deserve mercy, because people who harm children don't deserve mercy, and people who open the door for people who harm children don't deserve mercy.
I think I should say, before I start this episode, where I am on the Epstein story. If you force me to give you my best guess, given what we know, I think this guy had a lot of very powerful friends. I think this guy was a predator and a pedophile on an extraordinary scale. And I think those sides of his life were mostly separate. I don't think there is a list of bold-faced names somewhere. The reason I don't think there's a list is there's been a lot of big law firms hunting for cases here. There is a lot of money to be made in suing anyone connected to Epstein. Very, very powerful firms, to say nothing of big media organizations, firms and organizations that have the money to hire the best investigators, the best journalists, they're just not finding it.
So, I don't know. I'm just kind of confused. Now, maybe this will be completely invalidated in the next 4 or 5 days, because maybe Ezra will make something that talks about this. But one of the people that I usually look at when I'm trying to figure out what's going on in like normie politics is Chris Glazilla. You've seen me talk about his stuff on my channel before. I think that his channel is a really, really great resource for figuring out what's going on in the day politically without as much of a filter. And even Chris has been talking about the Epstein files thing less than a lot of other people have been. Like, if you look at the amount of times that, say, like me or Vosh or Zan or any of us have talked about the Epstein files thing, you're going to find a lot more representation in our coverage of that than you're going to find with most of your normal newscasters. But Chris was somebody who was fired from CNN, and he's still talking about it. Not as much as I would prefer, but still talking about it. I don't want to hang my hat on this idea, but I kind of want to at least introduce the idea that the people who are very, very influential in politics and in the news, who are currently not talking about one of the biggest events in political history that validates a shade of 1 billion different conspiracies for one reason or another? Is it possibly because that particular now all but confirmed conspiracy is about their bosses and the people who have power in our country, who actually have power in our country? Maybe be careful about who you consider on your side right about now. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.